سيداتي وسادتي، مرحبا بكم مجددا بعد هذا البريك.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is part 2 of day 2 of the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. Have you guys had lunch? Yes? Yeah? All feeling comfortable?
All full?
Ready to go? Cool, let's do it.
عالم ريادة الأعمال مليء بالقصص شبه الأسطورية عن أشخاص أسسوا أعمالاً ناجحة من لا شيء، لكن هل هذا أمر واقع حقاً؟ في هذه الجلسة ستتحدث ضيفتنا عن الجوانب المحددة لما يعنيه البدء من الصفر والمحافظة على مسار الرحلة.
The entrepreneurial realm is filled with almost mythical stories about people who built a business from nothing. But is that ever really the case? Well, in this session, our guests are going to talk about the defining aspects of what it means to start from scratch and staying the course on this particular journey.
رحبوا معي رجاء بمؤسسة شركة Backstage كابيتال أرلان هاملتون ومضيفة المدونة الصوتية عندما تفوز النساء رنا نعواس.
Please welcome the founder of Backstage Capital, Arlan Hamilton, on stage, and the host of When Women Win, Rana Nawaz.
Hello. So, excited, Cynthia. Awesome.
Calm down.
yeah, don't get too excited. Is Arlen's mic on? Great.
Can you hear me?
No.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Testing.
We're good now.
Great.
We're good now. Okay. Arlan, I'm so happy to meet you at the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. Thank you for being live on When Women Win.
Yes, thanks for having me.
To describe the people you invest in, you use a word that I like a lot. You use underestimated people. You don't invest in underrepresented people. You invest in underestimated people. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, so I think it's both. So the truth is that the people that I invest in, and myself even, we're underestimated. We're underrepresented in the U.S. And other places. But what we found what that really means is that we're underestimated. People, we walk into a room, and because we're a woman, we're taken for granted. That we don't know as much. Maybe walk into a room, and because I'm black, or the founder that I invest in is black, in the U.S., and maybe they're taken as not as intelligent, or maybe not as successful as they could be. So when we think about it, it's true that we're underrepresented. That's kind of like the fact, the boring fact. The exciting potential is that we're underestimated, which means there's something to come that's really interesting.
And how do you manifest that? What have you seen?
Well, I mean, I've invested in 130 companies led by women and people of color in the last 4 years alone, and most of those are in the U.S., some in London. And I actually just posted about this today on Twitter. Oftentimes we talk about the makeup of the person, the profile. They're a black woman, they're this or that. And that's part of our branding and how we get our message out. But when I just posted what they're working on, it's just remarkable. I mean, working across industries and deep tech, and everything from deep tech to beauty products and things that connect people, things that change lives, things that save lives. And the majority of these companies were at one point so undervalued and so overlooked that it was insulting. And that's where I saw, 6-7 years ago, the potential of what could be.
And what have you learned? Have you learned anything from these founders, these underrepresented, underestimated founders of yours?
I mean, I learn every day from them. That's part of the distinct honor that I have in working on this, and also part of the journey that keeps me inspired and excited about what I'm doing. I learned basically a confirmation, a reconfirmation of what I just said, which is that we're woefully underestimated, and you can choose to think of that as a negative and be frustrated by it and be saddened by it and be insulted by it, which I've been all those things at some point. Or maybe it's and. You can repurpose all of those emotions and all of that justified anger and justified insult and say, well, what does that mean? If there's a potential here that people are not really seeing the value in me, that means I can catch them off guard. That means I can go faster, further, better, and they won't see me coming. And so there's anyone who has any competitive streak in them, especially investors, the very competitive people, they should be looking at startups that are led by people who have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they've been treated a little bit poorly because we have so much to prove.
Are you competitive?
I'm very competitive.
Excellent.
I'm nice.
You don't have to be nice.
I think I guess there's a difference between nice and kind.
Yeah.
I'm kind. But I definitely strive for greatness. And I don't want anything with my name attached to it to be mediocre. It's just something that's important to me.
Yep.
We have a friend, this fly.
Yeah, this fly isn't letting go. That's fine. You mentioned that you've been doing this for 4 years. How has your outlook on investing in these founders, how has your outlook changed? You've mobilized $7 million into 130 startups. How has your outlook changed over the past 4 years?
Yeah, so I officially started 4 years ago, but I had been working on this for about 3 years prior. Mm-hmm. So I've been immersed in this world 7 of my 39 years. I always, even when I had no money, because I started with nothing, even when I had no money and no one was talking about it in Silicon Valley or beyond, in Texas where I was, or anything, no one was really mentioning gender or race. I knew that these companies existed. So it was, I knew they were there. I probably didn't quite understand how many qualified venture-backable companies there were going to be in front of me. I probably underestimated that, and that turned out to be a good thing because there's just so much to choose from. I probably also learned and underestimated how difficult it would be to explain, and then also with proof, with evidence, still have people doubting that this was a reality for so many people, and why it was so important for everybody, not just for the people who are being affected by it on face value, but for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, we have that also in the corporate world with gender bias. It almost doesn't, sometimes you can put the facts and figures in front of leadership and say, we know diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. We know that gender balanced teams make better decisions, but sometimes the bias is so strong they just can't get past it. So I hear you. Have you seen any recurring themes that differentiate between the successful and the less successful startups that you've funded in?
I'm very much so rooted in the founders and in their teams, and in the way that they can galvanize. So there are trends and there are statistics and all of that sure we can track, but I'm usually getting to the heart of the matter. And I notice people who kind of remind me of myself tend to outlast others. And it's people who can get people to rally around them, and who are hopefully inspirational in their own way. I think we undervalue that sometimes. Because you don't have to be an incredible writer or speaker. It's not about being charming or charismatic. It's about being able to express yourself in a way that you're going to have people going through things with you through thick and thin, and a lot of times not making much money and having to have faith in you. And that's employees, that's investors, that's vendors, customers, all sorts of people. And so that common thread, there are many. Select. One of those common threads is that someone is able to really draw people in to what they're doing and why they're doing it. And another thing, it goes back to kindness. Again, I don't need you to be nice, but kindness is a very huge determining factor. If you treat people without respect, eventually it catches up to you. If you don't hold other people in high regard, no matter what they do, from the custodian to the CEO and everything in between and sideways, then it comes back to haunt you, and I've seen that happen as well.
That's really interesting. The two things that you chose to highlight as to what makes businesses successful are personality traits of the founder, right? Be kind and be someone who can lead others.
I mean, we're seeing that play out right now in a few cases with these huge companies that you would think have the world going, everything going for them. But something has happened at the top level, and I'm not here to sit and judge, but it's observing it. You look at certain companies that are imploding, even with so much money and so many people behind it, and you dig deep and you see, okay, there's been evidence that the founder or some executive or someone in charge stopped treating people with kindness at some point along the way.
Yeah, I think the personality of the founder really does create the culture, which permeates. Arlan, when you started Backstage Capital, you were homeless. Could you expand on that?
Yes. It's interesting because Chris Gardner, I feel a kinship with him, even though it wasn't the exact same situation. He had a child, I didn't. But I definitely feel that story. So I've had many wonderful things happen in life, and so it's not that I had a miserable life, but I had a lot of housing insecurity for a long time in my adult life, and I found myself early 30s and still mid 30s, just not really having an address for too long because of finances, and quite capable, hard worker, bright, I would say, things like that, and coming from a loving family, all of that, but just found myself, for one reason or another, struggling to be above water. And at the very same time, I was discovering the discrepancies in the amount of capital and resources that was going to underrepresented founders. And not coming from that world at all, it just didn't make any sense to me. And so it was just the kind of insane juxtaposition of me, being very cash poor, but at the same time saying, well, I'm going to invest, I'm going to raise millions of dollars and invest in all these companies, and people not knowing what I was talking about. And various ways of being homeless. Again, it's housing insecurity. So I've never slept under a bridge or anything like that, but I've slept at the San Francisco airport multiple times and not known when the next meal was going to be there. I've walked the streets of Hollywood in the middle of the night so that I wouldn't, you don't want to fall asleep at night, on the street. So
not safe.
No, it's not safe. So I'd walk the streets, or I'd go into a cafe if it was open, or I'd go to a hotel lobby until they kicked me out. And then in the morning, I'd maybe try to sleep for a couple of hours. And this was relatively recent, so I still feel it very viscerally when I think about it.
Would you say that's the biggest obstacle you've ever faced?
I mean, it was definitely tough, and I'll never be there again, and I never wish it on anyone. And I don't think anyone will ever quite understand what it was like, as much as I can talk about it, because it was very difficult. But I feel like I've faced, even since then, even with the success of raising, even with the success of being so fortunate to be invested in so many companies that are fantastic, that raise has been really tough. We've had moments where we thought we were going to get capital, and that capital was going to be directly infused into companies that deserved it and that we wanted to have equity in. And then the day before it was supposed to be wired, millions of dollars they changed their mind. Or $100,000 they changed their mind just when we needed it as a team. And when I think about some of the tougher times, so probably my circumstances were worse while I was homeless. But to be honest, the tougher times for me have been when I think about, oh, my team is not getting paid, or what about their health insurance? When you're thinking, or what about that company whose founder is counting on me because we've committed and now my investor has backed out. So anytime it's been someone else on the short end of the stick, that's when it's really been like, okay, this is harder.
And how do you deal with that? Because for me, that sounds horribly stressful. That, that your employees have families, and the company that's counting on your capital has families, and you can't come through. How do you process that?
A couple of ways at the same time that are kind of diametrically opposed. One way is that I let myself feel that. I try to be as realistic as possible, even with my creative mind. I'm usually in the clouds, but when it comes to that sort of thing, I'm very much there. So it's very logical, really in the moment. And also, I go into strategy mode. I go into, okay, this didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. I know I have a plan B and a C and a F and a, X and everything else. What are we going to do? I get into that mode. When things are the most chaotic, I tend to get the most calm. The second part of it is, in addition to that part, I also, being in the moment, I also think about there are people counting on you. But the second part of it that I think has been really helpful, and it's come from just learning to adapt into so many different hard situations, is that I have to really remind myself, and I encourage others who are leading teams or feel you have people who count on you, you have to, I've been taught this by people who care about me, is that you have to understand that people are coming to work with you, for you, around you, and even the investments of their free will. And you can't save everyone. I can't save everyone. I can't fix everything. I can't be everything to everyone. And I have this savior kind of complex, so it's very difficult for me to understand that. But it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me is understanding that. Because you work as hard as you can to do the best that you can, but you understand that running yourself into the ground and beating yourself up and not giving yourself a break is no good for anyone, especially those who have to deal with you while you're going through that.
Right. So do you focus on self-care a lot?
Absolutely. I talk about it a lot. And I talk about it and then I check in with myself because earlier this year I realized I go online and I have literal T-shirts, that have my quotes on them and things on people's walls and, I'm waiting for the first tattoo. I literally have that. But every once in a while I look up and I'm like, wait a minute, you're too stressed. You're not following your own guidelines, your own advice. You can't just be a book of wall quotes. You have to live it. And so I try to check in with myself. And that's just, I think being able to do that is just me getting older, having more insight, being a little bit more, looking inward more. And again, the life that I have today is so drastically different than the one that I had 4 years ago. And it's happened so quickly, where in many settings in the startup world, or even outside of it these days, I am bombarded with a certain energy from people that is beautiful, but it is a lot to carry, to be someone that someone's looking to for certain things. And So again, you can't be good for someone else if you're not good to yourself. You can't treat other people well if you're not treating yourself well. It's just so, it's a cliche, but it's for a reason it's a cliche, because it's true.
When you were homeless and you decided to start a fund, and
It just sounds funny when you say it, yeah.
I mean, these are the
We're
facts.
homeless and decided to raise millions.
Yes, facts.
What were you thinking?
Well, no, it's more, I think I know what other people were thinking. So how did you sort of say, not listening to all these naysayers? What do you think were your key enablers in making this happen?
I've always had I've always kind of gone to the beat of my own drum. Speaking of drums from yesterday, it's a great metaphor. I've always been that way. I was always challenging and questioning in school and challenging people, and just out of curiosity mostly. And I also have a great respect for individual opinions and decisions, even if I think, I'm judging that it's a dumb decision. I have a respect for individual decisions. And so it takes a great deal for someone to knock me off of that. It's just something very innate, I think. And maybe it was built over time, a combination maybe. But that's not to say that there weren't times where I was crying on the floor.
We all have those
we
moments.
have those moments,
of course.
right?
Yeah.
But it was that picking yourself back up and saying, I mean, the best thing about what I decided to do with my life is that it involves so many other people. Because if it were just about me and it was just about getting rich or getting, fame or something like that, it would have lost its luster a long time ago, and it wouldn't have been worth it, I don't think. Or I don't think I would have been capable. But because there is a scalable impact in every moment of what has happened in the last 4 years, and that will reverberate for decades, I hope. There's just no way for that momentum to be stopped.
Yeah. I relate to that. I relate to the power of this purpose. For example, for When Women Win, this is a podcast about women like you, amazing women, so I deal with amazing women all the time, for people like you. And so I totally get how once you're on that path and there's a purpose and so many people are involved, it takes a lot to knock you off that path.
Yeah, and I also, I believe so many different things at once. I like that about myself, but I also believe that going back to like taking care of yourself and knowing that you can't do everything, it's not to say that because so many people are involved and affected that I can't stop if I wanted to. It's to say that I don't want to stop because of it. Okay.
Let's talk about silver linings.
Okay.
For a second. Well, maybe first failures. Are there any things in your life over the past 6-7 years that you would regard as a failure that stings?
Yeah, so the word failure is not, and Akon said this yesterday. It was great that he said that, because to me, I'm hard pressed to find something that I feel is failure.
Okay.
And I'm trying not to be hokey or cliche again, but every day that I wake up and live to see another day, I can't call the day before a failure. It just doesn't work for me logically. There have been, thank you. There have been many disappointments.
Disappointments, rather.
Many disappointments, many frustrations. Even things that didn't work out the way I thought they would, I have a hard time regretting. And I do an exercise every once in a while where I say, okay, like, you need to be really grounded and really understand this moment. Would you have changed anything? And I think about, times where people thought that I had failed, they had called it that, and I look back and I said, well, would I have changed any part of that? Any part of it? Well, if I ever hurt anyone, I certainly wouldn't want to do that again. but just a decision to live life and to give it a chance and to go after what I wanted and to hopefully impact people in a positive way along the way. No, I don't regret that, even if it didn't always work out.
And things like disappointments would be the people pulling capital at the last minute.
Yeah,
that
that's an
kind of stuff.
example.
Yeah.
It's a very, in-your-face example. But there have been all types.
Let's talk about highs for a
Okay.
minute. Give us a couple of examples of, over the past few years, some highlights of your career.
Wow. So I was on the cover of Fast Company magazine in the U.S. and South Africa, both of them, and the fall of 2018. And there's a video of me just crying my eyes out when I saw it for the first time, because it was so surreal, because I 3 years prior to that couldn't afford to buy the magazine. You know what I mean? Couldn't afford an issue of it.
Wow.
It was on the cover of it. So that was definitely a highlight, not because I saw my face at the airport every day, but because
That sounds pretty cool to me.
it was cool, yeah. But that
Yeah.
was why. It was because I was told that the copy was one of the best physical sellers. Like, they have more subscribers than anything, but there's a physical copy at the stores and the airports, and it was one of the best selling they've ever had. And I think it's because, and I know it's because, so many people saw themselves on this cover, because I'm not a celebrity it's just like someone who has done something interesting, and they know that they can do it too. And so that, meeting people who bring that to me and say that this helped me, that's been a highlight. There have been so many times where, couple of things. One has been where a founder that we've invested in has had a magical moment. And you look back and you say, I don't know if they would have been given a chance at a Silicon Valley venture fund. And now they are, but I don't know if they would have. And those moments is like, that reminds me of why we're doing it. That's not to say that every company we've invested in, we've helped. It's a lot of times it's the other way around. But those moments are special. And then there are moments when years have gone by or months have gone by, and someone comes up to me or calls me or emails me and says, this thing you did 2 years ago, you did one day 2 years ago, whether it was giving $500 on Christmas for something, which I did online a couple Christmases back, or it was this thing you said in a magazine or whatever. This thing catalyzed me and inspired me to do this other thing, and now this is the result of it. That is an addictive substance.
Yeah.
That feeling is addictive. And those moments, I have had so many highs. You think about raising $10 million or so and $1 million or so, and those are great. But I tell you, I got a message from someone who said that a $500 gift that I gave one day online to a stranger was enough to keep that person in business for their company for a few days. And that time, they were able to attract $100,000 from another investor. And when I heard that, I was more excited than when you told me $1 million was going to be wired. So I'm like, there's something very special about something.
Yeah. Because you view yourself as this catalyst.
Yes.
Right? Impact. So I'm putting words in your mouth. Maybe 2 or 3 words that describe you.
Absolutely. I'm driven by impact and legacy. I don't want to be driven by legacy for the sake of it, though. I don't want to be like, what am I going to do that's going to have that legacy? It's kind of like a back burner. But it is important to me. It's far more important than money or esteem in the day of. I think about catalyzing because, again, it's this scalable impact that a lot of times I won't even see.
Right.
And I'm going to quote her again. My mother is here. We came in from the States. My mom's
Where is
here.
she?
Mrs. Arlan. And my mom quotes something that she heard before that says, the seed does not see the petal. And when she told me that, I know she said it kind of in passing, and I keep bringing it back up because it makes everything that we do at Backstage and that I do in life, it just makes it worth it, because I don't necessarily have to see the result of it for it to be important and impactful, for it to fuel me, you know? So just to know that that's happening. It's almost like if you think about your podcast. I don't know how many episodes you have.
68. So who's counting?
Who's counting? Statistically, every minute of every day, someone is listening to an episode of your podcast. Something that you said a year ago, something that you said a week ago, is in someone's ear and in someone's heart. Like, you could stop today and that would be amazing, right?
Well, I love that. I think that's what I'm taking away. The first thing is that the seed doesn't see the petal, but it knows it's coming.
Absolutely.
Which is amazing. Let's talk about your book, because it has the coolest title in the world.
Oh, can I say it? Is it okay to say it?
Of course.
Because it has. I've heard people up here try not to say words, so I'm
okay,
not gonna
guys.
say it.
What do you think, guys? It's called About Damn Time. Can we say it? Can we say it? Yes.
It's About Damn Time.
About
It's the
damn
name of the book. Yes, it's. It comes out May 5th, 2020.
Okay.
It is in pre-order right now, so you can pre-order it. I think it's shipping worldwide, and then hopefully one day there will be translated copies and issues. And yeah, it's about pieces of my life, and it's a business book though at its core. And so hopefully it leaves you with very tactical, practical takeaways.
Is it for investors and entrepreneurs?
It's for both, yeah.
Both, okay.
And it's for people who, even if they're not doing a tech startup, if they're doing a smaller mom and pop shop, or if they're doing a lifestyle business, or even if you're not doing a business. I definitely wrote it with the same way I think about my own podcast, which is called Your First Million, that you can listen to now if you'd like. I do it for the person who's listening or who will be reading at their 9-to-5 job, and they want to feel connection. So it's not that you have to be a startup founder. You can be an employee of someone and maybe thinking about it for the future. But it's taking some of those lessons learned, and some of them are funny because I've had a really surreal experience. Some of it's heart-wrenching and sad, and everything in between, I hope.
What's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you? You walked into that one, Arlan. Sorry.
I don't know the funniest. Well, okay. It's not the funniest thing that's ever happened. It's one of the weirdest, though, and I don't talk about it often. So you know Kanye West.
Yeah, I think we know Kanye West.
So I used to work in live music production. So everybody who has like headphones on, I'm jealous of, because that's my world. And I've always been a hacker. I never really had any money, but I was always hardworking. I always caught on fast, but I always didn't quite get there, right? So I was working in LA as a production assistant for just a couple of weeks on this event. It's a live event, and it was like a gaming event.
Okay.
And Kanye was going to be the headliner. And I was doing menial tasks around. I was data entry here, or go deliver this here, or whatever. And I was borrowing my roommate's very old, dilapidated car that could barely get me there. And one day, they walked in and they said, we need someone to go pick something up in Beverly Hills. And they're like, you. And they point at me. And I'm like, sure, yeah, I can do it. And I know my car that I'm borrowing is not going to make it there, but what are you going to, because you have to kind of, you want to keep your gig. And I didn't have that much money, so I wanted to keep the gig, and I wanted to do my part. So I'm like, sure, I'll go do it. So they wanted me to pick up fire extinguishers that they had realized they didn't have enough of. The fire department had said, if you don't have these fire extinguishers, by the time Kanye hits the stage, at the pinnacle of this event, you will not have a show. You have to have it. So we were going to borrow them from a movie studio. It was this whole thing. So I'm like, okay, so I drive towards the movie studio, and the car starts to heat. Steam comes out of and
Sorry, my bad.
the windows, the air conditioner doesn't work, the windows are down, and it's like in the middle of like West Hollywood. It's just starting to steam. So I pull over to it's like a clothing store for old clothes. I can't think of the name right now, but that type of thing. And I don't know anything about cars or like logic or anything at this point, because I'm just freaking out because I know I have a certain amount of time. So I open the hood and try to open the thing to put more water in. And if anybody has tried that, you understand what happened next. Hot, steaming water splashed up into my face. And of course, I thought all sorts of horrible things because I couldn't tell. And I'm screaming, and I run into the store, and they're like, and I look crazy. And I'm like, I need water, I need something. And they're like, okay, go in there, there's a sink. And I go in, and I go up to them, I said, do I have skin still? I'm freaking out. They're like, you're fine. So I'm fine.
You're fine.
Very much so in pain, because I have hurt myself. Not terribly, but I'm in a certain amount of pain that I should get checked. So this is how my work ethic is. I don't know what anyone else would have done, but I kind of feel like they would have just said, let me call them up and let them know this isn't going to happen, or send somebody else. No. I said, I have to go to the hospital, but first, I'm going to go pick up those fire extinguishers.
Because hell, I need them now.
I still can't believe I did this. So I went, I got some sort of like, it wouldn't have been an Uber, but it was like a driver that we knew or something. I got to the place, I got the fire extinguishers, I had him drop me at the hospital, at the ER. I called a friend, and I said, you're gonna meet this driver way out of town. He's gonna give you a bunch of fire extinguishers, and you're gonna take him to the Kanye West concert. And it got there, and it cost me more than I got paid to make it happen.
Wow.
And I was at the hospital, and they said that if I didn't have my contact lenses in, I would have messed up my eyes.
Oh my God.
So it's not funny, but it's one of those surreal moments that happens to me quite often, and a lot of it is a lot of these types of stories are in the book.
Well, I think you answered the earlier question of what's your key enabler? It's like I would say perseverance, maybe.
Perseverance, yeah. It was like I had to do something. I don't know how smart it was or not. It was with good intention, but I was not practicing self-care that day.
No. So I'm going to open up to questions, maybe 3 or 4 questions in a couple of minutes. Last question I'm going to ask you before we bring it back after the Q&A. You mentioned your weekly podcast, which has a really cool name. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, the podcast is called Your First Million. We started it in June, and I'm sorry.
No worries.
Maybe we're allergic to the same thing.
The fly.
I started it. I started in June, and I just had this idea late last year. I had raised several $1 million. I was going to be on my way to earning my own first $1 million. And I had had different relationships with money throughout my life. Thank you. Different relationships with it. At first, it was this thing that I desperately wanted because it would make things better, I thought. Then it was this thing that I hated, I was bitter about because it made things so tough. Then it was this thing that I could empower myself with, a tool. And I was thinking about, what happens when you reach your goal? What happens when you get there? And also, I wondered, we always hear the story of maybe the hard times, the bad times, and then we hear the success. So you hear sleeping on the floor of the airport, raised $10 million. But what happens at this inflection point? And for me, the inflection point was what happens when you make your first $1 million. And it's not necessarily always money. Sometimes it's your first $1 million streams of a YouTube video or fans or something to that effect. But mostly it's been about capital. And what I found is I've been interviewing people from all backgrounds, all profiles, people who made their million self-made over the past 10 years, and people who have $500 million that happened at an incredible exit. And you just find this common thread throughout, and it's deeper and it's more emotional than anything I could have imagined. It's not just tactical, how do you make $1 million? It always comes back to, like I've had someone on, Jewel Burks, and then recently, just this week, Jamie Schmidt. They both said the same thing. They both sold their companies for millions of dollars, self-made, whatever term you think that is, self-made, strong women, and both of them, and Jewel said this pointedly, she cried the morning that the money hit her bank account in a bad way because she felt such a loss because this was something that was her identity for so long, which is something she thought she would celebrate, something she thought was the carrot, was the key.
The goal.
Yes, was now something she mourned. Jamie said the same thing. She sold her company for millions and millions of dollars to Unilever recently, and she said the first thing she felt was deep sadness. And then she slowly understood, okay, I can use this money to catalyze other people and so on, but she had to find purpose in it. And I just think that is so compelling to first of all just talk to someone and get into their heads about what kind of person gets to that type of success. But really, the underlying theme of it is, what are we really fighting for? What does it mean? And it's wonderful because I say it's a practical guide for future millionaires, because it's not all sad and it's not all great. It's a very nuanced and colorful, and you say you don't have a blueprint for when you get there. Now we're creating a blueprint.
Amazing. Right. Well, everyone, I would love to welcome some questions from the floor, if you have any. We have one over here. Is there a mic roving?
Yes, he's here.
Brilliant.
So
Near the front. Thanks.
Hi, Arlan.
hi.
You are welcome in Sharjah.
Thank you.
It's really 4 years, and you are investing on all these companies.
Yes.
And really, I would like to know how you started and how already you get this also idea to start it step by step till this for you.
So it was around 2011 where I just started to understand the startup world. I understood certain startups, like Airbnb, I knew about, mostly because I had applied for a customer service job there and didn't get it. But I thank them because things worked out. I knew about startups, and I'd always felt like an entrepreneur in some way, a founder in some way or another. Initially what happened was that I started seeing people investing, like Justin Bieber was investing, and Ashton Kutcher and Troy Carter. They were making these investments, and I thought, why is this interesting to them? Because they seem like they have really interesting lives. What is this? I was just curious, like most times. And so I started learning about startups, and I said, oh, this is amazing. I can start this. I'm going to start a startup. I'm going to start a company. And it was in that research, because I said, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to raise money for it. And if I'm going to try to ask for money, I want to know what the investors are thinking. So at first, I just started doing all this research about venture capital, angel investors, just so I would know what I was getting myself into. And so I could be as smart as they were going into the room. It was just a logical conclusion to me. That is when I learned, oh, wait a second. This magical land isn't so magical if you're a woman. It isn't so magical if you're a black person or Latinx in the U.S., an immigrant in the U.S. And that is when it was like I became a journalist at this point. I became deeply entrenched in trying to understand it and try to make it make sense. And that's when I said, wow, if this doesn't exist as this right now, but it's so interesting. What I'm learning about venture capital and investors is that you have an edge if you have a certain deal flow, if you have certain founders who are doing something different. I wonder what would happen if that was all you invested in. Because at the same time, I was learning that 90% of all venture funding was going to white men in the US. That's not how the country is dispersed. So I thought, oh, what if you just did the opposite? Instead of investing, less than 10%, what if you invested 90+%? And that's when it clicked. And I tried for 2.5 years. I asked a lot of investors. I met people. I cold called. Nobody was interested. They thought it was interesting, but they were not interested in being part of it. And finally, I met a woman angel investor in Silicon Valley who spent 3 or 4 months getting to know me. And she put in the first $50,000 total. So I was able to make an investment. And I had been working with founders the whole time. I never stopped. That's the key. I never stopped looking at my customer and my why. And so when she made the investment, I had that confidence. I didn't have to be worried about living expenses, and I could make my first investment. And then I just kept going, and I kept asking, and little by little. And then Mark Andreessen invested. And when you have Mark Andreessen on your deck as an investor, people are like, why? Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack, Brad Feld, who wrote many of the books on venture capital. All of these people became investors little by little as they started to get curious about what I was doing.
Thank you. Please, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Arlan. How are
Hi.
you? Hi. I want to ask you, how do you sniff out exaggerated pitches? A lot of funding going on in Silicon Valley. A lot of pitches are exaggerated. The most recent case would be Elizabeth Holmes and the Theranos debacle.
Yeah.
So how do you know from a right pitch or a wrong pitch? Is it a gut feeling and experience that you have, or could you just share it with us?
Yeah. I think what helps a lot is that I don't come from this world of, I didn't grow up at this college, and then I went to Wall Street, and then I went to Bain, and then I went, this sort of very specific path of an investor that happens, because I'm just coming from common sense world. I'm coming from, wait, that 1 + 2 is not adding up to 3 here, because I'll stop people and ask them, you can put any number you want on a page, and we're going to see the pitch competition later. We'll see, right? You can put any number on a slide, but I'm going to challenge you. And I think it was that, and also the fact that every cent, every penny that I invested, and still to this day invest, is so hard earned that I can't afford to just not ask the important questions. So a lot of it is instinct. I'm not always right. And it's also, they're not always understanding. Time tells everything. So you have to kind of be rooted in, and hopefully the person that you're meeting, and hoping in Elizabeth Holmes' case, I think most of us can agree there was some mental instability there. And
This is the bad blood.
This bad blood book,
okay.
yeah. And again, I don't get into the judging, at least publicly, too often, but I think in her case, because she was affecting people's health and their lives, it's important to point out. But, she fit a bill. Most of what my whole thesis is about going against the grain. Not letting someone necessarily fool you on paper because they went to this school, because they have this pedigree, because they know these people, because they're themselves already rich from legacy funding. Everything that I'm doing is against that grain, is against the common thought process. So it forces me to question things. And I'm just such a curious person anyway. I'm gonna ask questions.
Thank you.
How do you get to that number? how do you know that this is the market size, you know?
Thank you. Okay, wow, lots of hands up. Where's the mic? Okay, right next to someone, and then Adela, who can go next.
Hi, yes. Quick question. So do you invest only in companies within the United States, or you also take a look at other startups outside the United States?
So I started alone, and now we have a team, and I started in the United States because there's so much ground to cover. People think about the US when they're outside of it. Even inside of it, they think California, Boston, New York, we're done. There are 50 states, and each one of them has its own character and its own flaws, and I'm trying to address as much as I can. But I also I get to visit a lot of places and talk to a lot of people one-on-one, and I understand that there's a lot more to do. So you can rest assured that I do not go to speak anywhere because our days are numbered. I don't go for the sake of being there. I don't go to speak anywhere or go to meet anywhere where I'm not curious. So first thing that we did, I'll do more than one visit, get to know the ecosystem and see what's there. So we expanded outside of the US, first in London, because of the proximity and the abundance of African-led companies. And that was my opinion of it. There was many opinions, but I was really interested in, that's a really great way to meet a lot of African founders in a small area and get to know more and more. So we invested in 5 companies this year from London. I've been spending a lot of time in the Nordics recently. I've been invited, I've been waiting, but I've been invited now to South Africa and other places, Australia, et cetera. The truth is, so to answer your question pointedly, we invest where we want to. I built this, and our team built this from scratch, so we get to make the decisions we want to, whatever is interesting to us within legal limits. But to also note that it's not, like everywhere I go, someone wants us to invest, and our resources are very limited. We invested in 30 companies this year, but I probably aged by 10 years to make it happen. So I think expansion is inevitable, and it's something I definitely aspire to, but we have to be very clear and intentional.
Can I back?
Thank you. What do your founders most appreciate about you?
They think I'm adorable. As cute as a button. I've never been asked that. Let's see. The feedback I get is that for a company our size, being so small, limited with resources, and new and all of that, that we're painfully accessible. Having so many companies, everybody has access to every founder in our portfolio of 130 have access to my phone. If they use it, and not to say that will continue to be scalable, but that's what we've aspired to. And I think for the majority of them, understand that we are as much a startup as they are, and that we live under the assumption that if they win, we win, and if we win, they win. And so, just the community that has been built as a Backstage. When you're a Backstage founder, it's like you're a part of a family. And I think, although I don't, of course, have everything to do with every connection that's made, I think that I definitely am proud of that foundation that I helped set.
Thank you.
I'm giving all the tough stuff.
All right. Oh, man. Okay, 10 minutes. Let's see. All right, we have 4 questions. Yes. No more hands up. We'll take them, but please make them brief so we can get everyone. Yeah, okay.
So we'll get to everyone who has their...
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maria Muhammad. I would like to say I'm very proud of you as a woman and as an African that you made it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Don't make me cry. People looking.
You are making me cry, actually. I have tears in my eyes. What I would like to ask you, who is your mentor?
My mentor? I don't have a direct mentor, and I think of a mentor as somebody who's step by step with you in many ways. I learn from the founders in our portfolio, and I mean that. I learn from them every day. And I will call on certain people who have gone through, especially people who have gone through hardships, I'll call on certain friends that I now have to guide me through maybe one or two things. But I don't have a consistent guru type. Someone who keeps me very grounded, and always has really amazing advice is my mom.
Thank you.
So the
1, 2, 3.
the three
you're,
that were left.
you're all going to get your question. Okay.
So yes. Go.
Yeah.
Hi. I just have a question about you being a woman. In your early journey, how did you overcome all the common stereotypical ideas about women? Being emotional, you just mentioned instinct. They don't accept it in the man-dominated world. They tell you need to be logical. So how did you overcome all this?
Well, I'm very logical as well. I think people put limits on themselves and what they say about others. So when someone is saying things to me about you need to be this and that, I'm thinking, well, I already am. Perhaps you are not, and you're projecting. So it definitely is an internal like a self-esteem that I realize I have, but it also has grown over time. I wasn't exactly like that 4 years ago. So when it started, I just had to really just have a conversation with myself all the time and just say, that is their worry. You know, I say, and I still say this, you either help or you get out of my way. Everything else is their issue. You know, unless you're actively going out to hurt someone, I am a do no harm person on purpose, right? You don't do any harm. But if all someone has to offer you or any of us here is chirping, like we saw in this opening video yesterday, the noise of someone else, that to me is white noise. You know, I'll use that and make a song one day, but that has nothing to do with me. If I want to, drown some other noise out, I'll use it and record it, but that's nothing to do. So it's about really looking inward and knowing what you stand for, why you're doing something. It helps to have a really strong intention and a really strong why, because that'll continue to fuel you. Even when people are saying, I was laughed out of rooms when I said, in 2014, I said, I'm going to invest in 100 companies by 2020. And all of them are going to be led by underrepresented founders. I was laughed out of rooms. We reached that number in 2018. So who is laughing now? Nice. And anyone in this room can accomplish anything that they want to do. I suppose except for flying. Don't put that on your checklist for now, and maybe you will. Maybe you invent the jetpack that takes you there. But anyone can accomplish what they really find the truest intent.
Thank you. Man at the front, please, and then the gentleman over there. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming today. So my question was about self-worth. So
yes.
In your experience as a minority, how did you keep yourself reminded of your self-worth, even if at times you were made to feel like you don't belong?
I've always been made to feel that way in different situations. The good thing about it, usually, I mean, not in every single case, but the good thing about being an outsider or being part of a group that's underestimated or underrepresented is that you are part of a group. So you may not look in the mirror and say, I'm worth it, I'm great. But you know someone who reminds you of yourself or looks like you or is from your, tribe, and I mean that just as a community. And you know that they're great. And you know that they are made of the same stuff that you're made of. So I would look over, and even if I was having a bad day, I'm not with it today. I would look over and say, well, those women are kicking butt. And we are all made of the same stuff. Or that black person overcame so much, I can overcome this. So you don't always have to tap into your own reserves to find what you need. You can look to others, not necessarily aspirationally, someone who's already made it. Maybe you're looking over. You're looking at your friend, your family member, and sometimes it's you in the mirror. And you can say, we are worth it. That helps.
Thank you. And last question from that gentleman. Thank you all for your questions. These have been fantastic. Very engaged audience.
Yeah. Thank you a lot. It's been really inspiring. And my question is about scarcity and abundance and mentality. And have you had this shift from scarcity to abundance? As you told me that you couldn't even buy this magazine, yes? Because right now I feel like as a language coach, like I use all the skills, yes, improve, like I've gone through like 15 Mind Valley courses. I bought all the courses by Jim Quick. I've invested in personal growth like up to $10,000, even studying like MBA in California. And every moment when I feel like I'm reaching this abundance, it just doesn't happen for some way. And I look at my like bank account, it's just $2,000 and doesn't go like further. And I tried like hypnotherapy, everything. So the question is, what is this shift? Does it exist? And do you, is there a way when you just in this flow of abundance and you're going, or you're still like struggling, it will be happening? So thank you a lot.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a deep question. It's multi-layered.
And you have 30 seconds.
And I have 4 seconds left. No, part of, and I hear what you're saying, right? A few answers, but I won't get into all of them. The core ones are, the coolest thing that one of the coolest things I've learned in the last 4 years, 5 years, is that you can repurpose what success means to you. That's free. You don't have to pay anything, you have to get a course. So you can just exchange the word success with abundance. You can repurpose what is amazing to you. So right now, if your threshold, if your marker is abundance to me, is when I have $100,000 in my bank account. And right now I have $2,000, so there's $98,000 in between, and there's not abundance there. You can right now, or at home, or wherever today, you can say to yourself, abundance is $1,999, and I have more than I'll ever need. Because to me, it's about repurposing what the meaning of things is. Because the other way around, you are beholden to other people. If this other person doesn't write a check, if I don't get this job, if I don't get this investor, if I don't pass this course, I'm not. You are because you say so, if you say so. And I say that from someone who, personally, I'm doing well. At my gig, we still struggle financially. So I get to experience both every day, feast and famine every day. And I give most of my personal money to the company. And the best thing I could have done, one of the best things I could have done, is a couple of years ago say, you already won. You already won. So everything else is a bonus. So think about anything that you've accomplished, because you have accomplished something. I don't know you, but I know that. And make that the line. You've already won. Everything else is gravy. Everything else is bonus.
Nice.
And I really believe that's how you start attracting. I say if you want to attract money, but you don't have money, you have to be money. So you become, and then it attracts.
Oh, thank you. Right. Wow. Well, we are almost out of time, but I'm going to do the rapid fire round.
Oh, okay.
Surprise.
Okay.
Right. Rapid fire. If you had one message you could give the world today, what would it be?
Treat yourself better.
Treat yourself better. Love it. What's a question you wish people would ask you more often?
Would you like a nap?
Now you're jet lagged. What's the answer?
That's literally what I would say any day of the week. Because, again, self-care. I'm serious. Would you like to sleep in this corner of the room or in that?
Love it. What's a book you've recently gifted someone?
My own book, It's About Damn Time,
Nice.
and available at pre-order. Also, The Memo by Minda Harts,
Aha.
for anyone who feels like an outsider at work.
Lovely. Thank you. And where can viewers, audience, listeners find you?
You can listen to Your First Million, which is the podcast that I host. I'm also available. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Arlan was here. My first name was here.
Lovely. Everybody, a round of applause. Thank you so much, Arlan.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take this.